every game that I make and every experiment and every project that I work on, even in film or gaming, I bring in talent that technically don't necessarily would be considered in that place a lot of times. Yeah, and I do that because I want to make people feel uncomfortable, and I mean in a good way, because it really stimulates the brain.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Zai Ortiz. Zai is a visionary creative entrepreneur with a 20-year career in Hollywood VFX, working on projects like Iron Man and Mission Impossible. Recently, he's partnered with Nolan, the founder of Atari, to develop a range of projects under their award-winning company, Versix Games, where they're exploring the next generation of technology and entertainment. Today, we'll be talking about Zai's pursuits in areas like voice, AR, blockchain, digging deeper into his mind and his perspective of the future of entertainment and what drives him to want to keep exploring new technology and forms of media. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 12 of season 4 of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome Zai to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I mean, the pleasure's all mine. I think you just the current work that you're working on and just the path that you've gone on in your career, you are really, I feel, a visionary in terms of the kind of technology that you're exploring and what you have explored. And it's a huge pleasure for me to talk to you. So I hope we manage to get deeper on some topics, but I just feel like the amount of projects that you're working on, we're going to have to kind of glaze over to just hear the extent of all the different areas that you're kind of interested in. So I guess one question that I want to ask first is, how do you not get distracted and pulled into every single direction with all the kind of emerging technology that's coming about, all the different experiences and ideas and innovation that's happening? How do you not get pulled in so many different directions, and how do you choose the kind of few things that you want to dig deeper into?
That's one of the hardest things, because there's so many. I'm like a kid in a candy shop when stuff like that happens, when I hear about new technology and the possibilities, because I never see it like singularly, like one piece. I always see it like connecting with another piece. And so when I see new things come out, I'm like, oh, how can this work with this? And how can you break it to make something else, or kind of a melting pot of stuff. So, to not get caught up in everything, I think what happens is that I kind of look at it from afar, and I kind of look at the utility of it to see, is it a creative platform? Is it a creative, can I do something with it creatively? Because all of it stems, for me, is that I have to drive it through creativity and entertainment. And so if I could push that into that when there's no means for that to do that, or the purpose of the developer wasn't that, it actually makes it fun to kind of push it in that direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like when you're thinking of like businesses and successful businesses, that like there has to be, the timing has to be right with the market for it to, time well with a new idea, and there to be enough people to kind of like get behind it too. And I feel like you're in a space that is, not so far ahead, but I feel like you are nearing to the other end of the spectrum, where you are prioritizing the creativity and the art behind it, which I absolutely love. But it must be hard when you are so passionate about something, but the rest of the world kind of hasn't caught up yet. Have you had kind of many moments like that where you've had to give up on projects because there isn't enough of a consumer base or things like that you've had to put things on hold? And what has that like experience been like?
Yeah, there is like I was passionate. I built this whole deck for this immersive museum, this interactive museum called Mural X, and it was kind of like an art hub for families to go to. And to really have people go to it and enjoy it, and to have haptics and have all these interactivities, it just wasn't ready yet. Like, I'm hoping one day it will be, but it's one of the first projects that me and Nolan designed together. And we've always looked back at that presentation and our notes are like, man, this is one that we really want to do. It just, you know, it's one that it's really difficult to do because there's so many pieces that we need to bring together, and then it's at a location and that has its own things that we need to figure out. And as a creator, I'm not, on that side of it. I'm here to kind of experiment, and sometimes a lot of the stuff, like, I've created projects just to create projects. It wasn't there for retail. It wasn't there for making any income, but just to experiment. And then some others came out of that experiment and became something that was purchased. When we worked through Versix, me and Nolan, we were working on. We have a whole bunch of games under that roof. We've actually been brought to the company to be acquired, and we haven't gone through with that because there's a lot of assets there because they're unreleased, and we like the games, we like what's in the portfolio, but at the same time, it's hard to do, follow the path of board games and voice activation because it's still to cross over those two mediums. If we were just in one medium, it might be easier, but we're kind of trying to connect two mediums, that there is a friction there because, the household family might have an Alexa, but they think of it as more of a music player and note taking or something, or for recipes, but not as a game device. And so, and then you have the board gamers saying, hey, we love it. It would be amazing to talk and use commands, voice commands, and then imagine all the scenarios in your imagination. And there, I've got so much feedback that you know how to draw the picture in my mind. And that's a real compliment because that was what I wanted to do. Is, one of the things that me and Nolan have talked about. It's like we talked days in and days out about video games and graphics, and I talk about graphics every day. And so love 3D. I use Maya. I learned Maya back when I was early 19, 20 years old, like when I was, and I studied through Alias Wavefront. So they took me under their wing, the creators of it, and I did some training with them. And so that's how I got the boots on the ground. And the first film I worked on was Fast and Furious 2. And so I got into 3D animation not because I wanted to go into film or gaming. It's because I was a painter and I drew as a child. That was my jam, is being an artist and creating. And I first got I got a Atari 2600 when I was young, and I realized that my dad bought it from Sears. And when I got that home, I plugged it in and realized how amazing it was to interact with something. Because at that time, you were passive. And I loved movies at the time, and I was inspired by directors, but I was like, well, I want to be part of this, not just passive watching it. And that's what video games do now. You're part of it. And so I can't wait when I kind of see what people do with story and narrative in the future, because the interaction is amazing. Like I'm all in with branching narrative. That's how kind of my mind works. Like if you could see my desktop, it's like everything is branching narrative. All my thoughts break up into different branches. And that's how I think. And also that's how stories work. And that's how life works, And so, creating that way is inspirational for me.
Yeah, I really want to talk a bit more about interactive media and telling stories versus being the kind of creator of the story, which I'll try to remember to touch on that a bit later. But going back to what you were saying before about the voice projects that you're talking about, just for the audience listening that might not be aware. So you've got Saint Noir, which is well, you got Saint Noir, and then
Yes.
there's two voice projects. Do you mind just talking about them and kind of the summary of how they're different for, yeah, because I never even thought about entertainment through like a voice hub. So could you explain a bit about the yeah, just like the summary
Yeah,
of what those games are?
I think the best way to is kind of going to the origin of why, because me and Nolan were in an airport and we were walking through and we just saw everyone with their heads down on the phone, right? And we're like, oh man, this is weird. Like no one's communicating. It's just like it's just heads down on the phone. And where we've been before that conversation, we were talking about family time and bringing
Mm,
families together. And so we were thinking like board games bring families together, bring people together, friends together, and so in a physical place,
mhm,
right? I mean, we have all those channels online to do that, but I mean in a physical place. And so we were thinking what would be the next step to really elevate a board game to make it interactive but without a screen,
mhm,
and to also have this disbelief of imagination for the person to create the story in their minds. And so we started using voice to interact that way. We actually built a game and we had like interactive lighting, mood lighting
mhm.
to affect the people that were playing the game. And it was really fun. It's just like, well, how do you get that to the masses? That one is a difficult one.
Yeah.
And so we figured, okay, how do we do that? We were trying to figure out, and we were developing maybe our own voice narrative built uh, into the board game itself. And then we quickly realized that that's going to be a hard update situation. And, we don't want it to be locked in and stuff like that to do updates. And so we kind of went the path of Amazon Alexa for this because we were able to quickly deploy new updates and fixes and stuff. And we were looking up the adoption rate of it, and we're like, well, those are our users.
Mhm,
And so that just made complete sense. It's like, okay, they're in, mostly everyone's home in the US right now, and they're adopting across the world. Let's start with that. And so we kind of created the game before we even mentioned it to Amazon. So I reached out to them and they were like, "What? What are you creating?" They're like, "No way." And so we went to meet with them and we all played the game together and they were just like, "What the heck? Like this is so involved." And they didn't realize like, we didn't even use their API or we didn't even sign up.
mm.
I mean, it was all like hardcore coding, just like, and they were like, okay, well, can we work with you guys? And I said, sure, yeah, that's why we're here. We want to partner up and, we want to see what we could do.
Mhm,
It was an experiment. I mean, it came out of love and it came out of a passion for murder mysteries.
mhm,
And, when we built the game, it was actually built for hardcore gamers. The game was like 2.5 hours long, but what was happening is that we were getting steered towards being more commercial. And so it's like a 20-minute round, very simple. The
mhm,
adoption, getting the statistics of who owns an Alexa, will have families. So you have to make it more household friendly.
mm.
And so it kind of got stripped away that way to make it more, and also just the adoption to understand that you need that device is like a barrier.
Yeah.
So we were stripping it away to make it as simple as possible. It's still fun, but it's just like, just so your audience knows, like we were trying to hit the hardcore, you know, gamers and board gamers out there. And I think one day we will, but I don't think it was right to do that for our first game. We
Mhm,
needed some adoption. Um, And we were very early for something like that. That's another thing,
Mhm.
is that being very early doesn't mean that is going to be the best and the holy grail.
Yeah.
But we are very proud of all the awards that we won. We won like Best of Innovation for CES.
Mhm.
That was a big surprise to us, and
It's huge.
a Cappy Award and all that. So I think it was very much recognized in the tech community and inside the developer community for sure. Retail, Amazon, took over a lot of, basically all our units, and we sold to them. So, and they took it on the market, and which we were happy to do that, because we're not a retail store, we're creators. So, and then all that worked out. And right now it's like, we were really thinking about shifting gears away from doing those voice games for the time being, because we were hoping that this will like spark other people to go, we have competition, we want competition, we need competition, you can't be this only one in the sea.
Yeah.
Right. But it didn't like really spark a lot of other people to do it. And I know other, like Hasbro, Mattel, all of them have been trying to do it, and talking with them, they're like, how did you guys make this so fast? And I think a lot of times it's because we're small and nimble, and we come from a place of not knowing and never doing it before. So we're just trailblazing.
Yeah.
Right. There's no guidelines. And so no one's saying like, this should take 2 years, or there's no one saying, this is how I did it before. And it's like that's like the curse of death to say that, And so, and I brought in, every game that I make and every experiment and every project that I work on, even in film or gaming, I bring in talent that technically don't necessarily would be considered in that place a lot of times. Yeah, and I do that because I want to make people feel uncomfortable, and I mean in a good way, because it really stimulates the brain,
So in what sense do you go to like completely different industries and like find like, for example, I know Elon Musk found game developers to work at SpaceX because he felt that they were like the most hardworking. But like, where do you look for your talent? I find that so fascinating as like a leadership quality.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that I found that is very useful as a leadership quality, is to really mix different people, not the same, because everyone that has the same in the same industry might be in different levels, but there is this glue that happens that is not necessarily bad. It's just that you need something to poke at it to kind of discover something. They need to pop something. And so, let's say you bring someone in that's a scientist, you're working on a game that has to do with certain mechanics with mathematics, and and you have your programmers, you have your game designers, you have your level artists, but why not, if you have a producer that's a game producer, maybe you have two producers, one coming in from the film world that sees it from a different perspective than the game perspective, especially if you're making cinematics and making it photoreal. They might know some technology that's out there in the film world that could be brought in, or vice versa, or mix the two. And just for like a scientist coming in to really give their perspective of, physics and weigh things, like weigh and how heavy and how someone's supposed to fall. Like, I think that's really important, because, in animation school, people do study that, but really it's very much, you study that for 3 months or something like that. And of course, there's people out there that study for 50 years.
Definitely.
So just bringing someone like that on board, just on the project for a certain amount of time, is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I really, really love that. That's really inspiring. And I think a lot of leaders out there can be inspired by that. And yeah, just look outside of their industry and try think of some people that are in completely different career paths that could provide an interesting perspective. Just for the sake of time, because there's a few other things I want to talk about.
Of course.
Blockchain, and I know you're actively working on a few blockchain games, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this because it's so the space right now. I feel like a lot of people are talking about how it can make the money, how it can be like a quick buck that they can turn around. But I feel like you're not thinking like that at all. Like that's not what drives you and what you're passionate about. So I'd love to know
No.
what your thoughts are on blockchain and the kind of potential for it to be fun and engaging and a new form of entertainment and like a new sector that's being built. Like what are you currently
Yeah.
working on? What do you love about it?
Well, I'm studying the psychology of it because it's really interesting out there with the pay to play.
Pay to earn. Play to
yes,
earn.
yes,
Mm.
and the play to earn, and to be able to purchase NFTs. The way that that works, I feel like there's a, I started becoming an NFT collector and spent too much money doing it, love supporting, but there's definitely an interesting way of going about it. And when I first started, I was collecting a different way, and now I collect because it's a totally different way now. Months later, it's more about the artist and their appreciation of what they've done. And then, I didn't know. I was just not knowing the basics of it all. And I think it's just depending on everyone on their own. So for like, and then I saw the value. It clicked in my mind of working with games and NFTs to kind of make things unique based in the game and stuff. And so, and I realized a lot of the games that I've designed in the past really kind of needed that contribution of the blockchain to confirm it. Just wasn't there or developed further to really integrate it in. A few years ago, my company was experimenting with blockchain games and kind of small things just to kind of understand the space. It was just mostly internal, and it didn't feel as robust. Like for us, the graphics, we wanted it to feel a little bit more robust and stuff. And then I find now that the opportunity is there for people to really create beautiful games on the blockchain. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what other people do. I mean, we're taking a slow roll into it right now. I think it's more of a learning curve for us, and really trying to figure out if this is the ultimate goal for us to really create, if we're capable of creating, successful games on this. I think it is the future. I think there's a lot of big potential upside to it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting space. I mean, I just released my first NFT drop last week, and it was so much fun. I never had so much fun doing it.
Yeah.
And the reviews and people that bought it, I was, so grateful to see the reaction to it.
Yeah. So one thing that I hear again and again when it comes to NFTs is the communities behind them. And I'd love to know your perspective on just community in general. Do you put a lot of value behind communities and how they're built, or I feel like you're more of like a solo person that likes to stick to your own opinion and trust yourself more? But what is your relationship with communities, and maybe the community that you're building with the NFT drip you just did?
Yeah, I mean, that's still something that I'm trying to fall into, because as you mentioned, it's kind of like a solo. I'm kind of a private artist. Like I kind of put my head down and really grind and kind of discover things on my own. I just, I'm starting to now open myself up to a lot of conversations and figuring out things with other people outside of my team and stuff. And the drop that I did is not really, it's not per se like a collection of 10,000 collectible.
Yeah.
It's really fine art that is in a collection.
Yeah.
I see it more of a long-term hold and a long-term value of the legacy of, the first, arcades and games made commercially that now we see. For me, I have a passion for making games and seeing the beginning of time to create that with the creator. And it's almost like a historic time capsule.
Yeah.
And so that is a different approach of how I'm taking NFTs currently. Obviously, the road could change and paths of other projects that I do with others, but in this one in particular for Arcade OG,
Mm-hmm.
it's a Genesis collection. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a very valued collection of appreciation and nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, if I get involved in another collection that has like, 10,000, I would assume, the discords and everything you need to really kind of have that huge community. Arcade AG didn't release that many, was on purpose. It wasn't about, going to go make millions off this. This was about really putting in the holder's hands a piece of history, and you could see from the limited edition and how many pieces that were released. We were trying to cap it at 100.
Mm-hmm.
That was the goal. And then the 15-minute clock, we were thinking, okay, we'll sell like 3 or 5 more, maybe 2. Yeah. But it actually clocked in an extra 100, which we were like, we actually didn't want that, to be honest, because what we wanted is for it to be as rare as possible. I mean, we were living on this earth that's floating in the middle of the ether, and having like 100 of them in around the world is very valuable. We see it as, even though it was popular at the moment to sell even more, we were grateful that we saw that activity, and so more people were able to get that in their hands. So it's an interesting way of seeing it, because I see that if gaming can take that approach, there might be a way for self-funding games outside of investors, which will be 100% more rewarding and an upside for the creator. I've gone the traditional route of investors for a very long time, and as fun as it is, it's a very hard road too. There's a lot of no's before yeses. So, and then that takes the creator away from creating. I think this approach with NFTs can really, you can be creative because you're creating to sell, as well as having a roadmap to a successful game. You just need to follow through.
Totally.
And follow through properly. And if more people can do that, I think that this road will see itself. We've a lot of people go on Kickstarter, do that road as well, and that's not easy. Yeah, that's not easy. There's a lot of preparation for just raising money on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know the statistics of how many successful, especially just because games are so expensive and long to create, how many successful Kickstarter campaigns don't end up happening, because those same people I feel like would potentially look for this whole NFT model to develop their game, and it is really interesting just because of how
I heard there's more than what's successful for sure, by the thousands. So I don't that's what I was told. So
So one thing I'd love to ask your opinion on is what do you think of meme culture? I feel like when you talk about things like
Mhm.
nostalgia, and that's what kind of inspired you to do the arcades OG, like I feel like meme culture is almost on the other end of the spectrum, where it's, you know, it's ephemeral, it's fast, it's based on trends and like social dynamics. Do you kind of are you into that space? Do you connect with it, or do you feel like you don't really understand kind of meme culture and the kind of things that are happening in that space?
I do understand it and I have fun with it. And, I chuckle, I laugh. I enjoy kind of the the communication without words,
Hmm.
because I'm a visual person. I've always told this to people that if you're going to explain a project, let's look at pictures instead of talking about it, because
Yeah.
I'm just going to get it faster. And meme culture is like that with me. Like I
Hmm.
get it. It just communicates for me.
Yeah.
Um, is it all great? No, it's not. It's just this, it's a lot out there. I mean, you have to go through and what you see, but it's definitely an interesting way of communicating to people. I just think it's fascinating, especially for creators that understand, or artistic people, or someone that could uh, see visuals in a different way than
Hmm.
others. I think a lot of people have that ability. I think everyone has that from the start. It's just how much you kind of attend to it.
Hmm.
You know,
I love
it's
it.
like when I was in art school as a child, my art teacher would cultivate the artists in the class, and once you get out, there was other teachers that would be like, you have to do this before art. Art's not important.
Mm,
And so the psychology of that
mm,
really ruin a child's ability later on to
hmm.
think how good they are or
Hmm.
what they're capable of. And so when you block that out of the mind, it's you know it might stem from that. Luckily I was always nurtured in my creativity as a young age.
Mm. I love that. I love that you touched on that as well, because it's not just art. I think it's just creativity in general isn't really like celebrated in like a school system, which is
Yeah.
like that's a whole other conversation that unfortunately I don't think we have time to have. But I love that you at least touched on it, and that hopefully people listening that they could be studying or in school can like know that it's okay to be creative, and that it's definitely you're able to be successful and have a career in that space. Um,
Most definitely. My wife is very creative, but she cannot put she's all about words, but
yeah.
she's creative, but not with pictures.
Yeah.
And so I see an amazing ability in her, how creative she is and how she expresses it through her words, which I'm very different. I do it through images. So I think there's a medium of creativity for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that Nolan has taught you in your kind of journey and perspective on the world, what would one thing be? I'm sure there's a ton, but what's one thing that you'd like to
Yeah.
put out there?
There's definitely many for sure. Um, but one is, he has instilled in me a, I would have to say this, to pursue dreams, to pursue the weird. Uh, you know, that is in his mantra, is doing things weird. And I think what he really means by that is not just like doing crazy off the shoot things, it's just different,
Hmm.
doing things different
Yeah.
uh, than other people. If you see someone go, you see everyone going in one direction, hell, let's go the other way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just more fun to find out what's there, even if it might be just you and someone else. But if no one's exploring it, you won't know.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that, and I kind of follow that path. And I think it feels fills my brain, my heart, and my soul to always discover the journey.
Mhm.
The journey is really the most important part for me. It's not really about starting and finishing it. Once I finish it, it's over, you know? So it's the process.
I love that. How cool it must be to have a friend like that and a partner as well that you can connect with on a daily basis. I find that really inspiring. And I could just tell in your tone and just I feel like conversations could go on for hours where you just explore
Yeah.
different potential ways that the world might work. And I mean, this conversation already, it's almost been 45 minutes, and I feel like it's just gone in a flash. And I've already accepted that I won't feel satisfied by the end of this chat, because there's just too many things that I'd love to kind of dig deeper into. There's a quote that I've seen associated with you several times around the internet, and that's no matter the medium, if the story is created with choices and various narratives, the experiences can be endless. And I would love to know if you can just like elaborate on that and why that quote is so important to you, and kind of what your vision and mission is at the moment.
Yeah. And, you know, what it is that creativity is endless, and creativity is a story, and life is your story. And so I believe that's endless here and beyond. So keep on telling that story. It's I think that's really important. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's part of who you are. And, you know, everyone does it totally differently. And so, you know, someone might do it. What you're doing right now is supplying a podcast for everyone to learn and educate from. You know, I admire that. You know, like when I got into film, I always question myself, am I doing something of service there? And then, you know, a lot of people have looked and said, wow, you just reached 1 billion people on that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
You know, like I helped kind of make someone laugh, you know. Um, it's, you know, there's different parts of this life that we contribute to, and sometimes we don't realize that we are doing our part somehow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know that's
Yeah.
probably a little deep.
No, but I love it. I like to go deep on the podcast. I often ask people what their definition of a game is. I think that quote, I think, sums it up well. And just having like endless
Yeah.
experiences
Oh
is kind
yeah.
of makes sense.
Important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't really know what questions I could ask to not open up another kind of can of worms and have to sit here for you know, as much as I'd love to. I also want to make sure we kind of tie a bow around a lot of the conversations. So I kind of want to just spend the last few minutes plugging your stuff and making as many people aware of where they can find and learn more about you, in case they want to continue these conversations. Maybe they're inspired and they have a few more questions. So if they're wanting, if you're wanting to follow Zai Ortiz, you can find him on Twitter at ZAIORTIZ_. Also on Instagram at Zai Ortiz _ or LinkedIn at Zai Ortiz. I also link the show reel to Dark Matter, which is your studio where you can see some of the work that you've done. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to direct people to see more of like what your work, or where you're planning on uploading more content in the future?
Well, I think a good place if people want to ask me questions too is that we just opened up our Discord for Arcade OG,
Awesome.
and it's not, you know, it doesn't. No one needs to be a holder of it just to communicate. It's
Awesome.
open to everyone, and also open to the holders. So that might be a good place to really kind of do a shout out and communicate with me personally there. So that will be in real time. You could go to, I think the Discord is on the Instagram. No, it's on the Twitter and handle there, as well as arcadeog.com. So
awesome. I'll link it
Yeah,
as well below, and you could see me in the Discord channel as well. I'm definitely going to join that and check it out, um, which is awesome.
awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm almost too inspired right now. Usually with guests, I'm able to kind of answer every kind of question that's bubbling in my head, but I feel like there's been too many high level topics that I haven't really even figured out how to ask as a question yet. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
inspiring me.
I'm
And
happy to come back and
yeah,
do the sequel. And so we
yeah,
could continue some of that in the future,
give
Thank you
me
for
a
having me.
yeah, no, it's a pleasure. And anytime. And I'm really, really excited to see the kind of projects that you explore in the kind of gaming space, but even not even games, but just experiences, using different technology. I'm really fascinated by the kind of ideas that you have and how you put them into motion. So thank you so much for your work. Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
what you do in the future, and all the best. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or any other podcasting service. Other than that, you can find links to this episode down in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.